All right. Well, thank you so much for joining this virtual webinar series called The Elephant at the Table. This series explores how power inequities in food systems undermines sustainability of food. Food systems are shaped by power. Who controls the resources, who sets the rules, and whose interests are protected. And when power is ignored, efforts to improve food system sustainability remain marginal. This program, upcoming book, and webinar series is led by Jose Luis Chicoma at the New Institute in Hamburg, Germany, and co-edited by Kristen Reynolds at the New School. And this series draws on a year-long collaboration at the New Institute in Hamburg, Germany, involving 8 scholars and practitioners who develop food policy recommendations to confront power across food systems, including sectors like agroecology, fisheries, seeds, affordable diets, and governance. This series is hosted by Food and Planet, the Food and Social Justice Action Research Lab in the Food Studies at the New School, and the New Institute. And we also want to welcome our co-hosts, Slow Food International, IPES Food, and UNDP, all of whom are doing critical work on food and power in their own right. And this series covers the 8 topics as listed on this slide. This is the first session of 8 and truly lays the foundation by examining how power operates across food systems, setting the stage for more sector-specific webinars that follow. A special thanks to the event staff at Lane College and the New School for Social Research, the IT staff at the New School, and Cedric Gottfried, a PhD candidate in public policy and urban policy at the New School, for helping to run this webinar series. So I'm very excited to introduce our speakers and co-host commentators today. First up, we have Jose Luis Chioma. He is the program chair of the Future of Food at the New Institute, a member of the UN high-level panel of experts on food and nutrition security, former Minister of Production of Peru, and a co-editor and co-author of The Elephant at the Table, an upcoming book launching later this year. Also presenting is Kristen Reynolds, the chair and associate professor of food studies at the New School. She's also the founding director of the Food and Social Justice Action Research Lab, co-editor of Radical Food Geographies, and co-editor and co-author of The Elephant at the Table. Our commentators and co-hosts today, joining us, we have Eddie from Slow Food International. He's a Ugandan farmer and a leader of the global movement working for smallholder farmers' rights. Thank you for joining us, Eddie. We also have Molly Anderson, associate professor at the Institute of Agroecology at the University of Vermont, member of IPES Food, and an author of one of the most important books on food and power called Transforming Food Systems, Narratives of Power, that was published in 2024. We also have Anna Pascal. She's an advisor on food and power at UNDP, coordinating their food and power initiative. So thank you all for joining us today. We're very excited to begin this webinar. Before I pass it over to Jose Luis and Kristen to kick us off, I want to mention that you are able to drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to address those questions during the Q&A portion of this webinar. Now I will hand it over to Jose Luis and Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, for the introduction. And as many of you are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, this is the most relevant moment in decades to talk about power and food systems. We're living through a period of deep disruption. Wars and conflicts are directly threatening food production, distribution, and access right now. And the big picture is that the global consensus around cooperation is breaking down. Progress in sustainable development and climate change was very slow. It had many structural flaws, and it produced many inequalities, but it was still better than not cooperating at all. So now is the moment that if we want to rebuild a structure that promotes food systems that are more sustainable, that are healthier and fair, we have to deal with power directly. And we're here today to talk about food and power as experts here in the panel. But the truth is that everyone working on food systems is in some way an expert in power. Many actors are not naive about it. They are skilled at navigating and negotiating the power relations. Politicians and policymakers grapple with power all the time. And I say that from experience. Negotiations within food systems are shaped by competing interests, by lobbies and trade-offs. even the most committed reformers, those policymakers, those politicians that are pushing hard for food systems transformation, must negotiate with powerful actors every day and have to build coalitions to counterbalance them. On the other side, like global and regional development banks develop their strategies and recommendations to many countries, especially in the global south, under the influence and pressure from major stakeholders, which are the most powerful states in the world. On their side, like United Nations agencies have very ambitious development goals, but they must constantly navigate the power of the governments that fund them and the power of the governments that host them. They balance their bold agendas with the need to secure the buy-in from states that can easily block or dilute their efforts. International NGOs and donors take different approaches on power. Some focus on influencing governments, others choose to engage with corporations to promote change, and others align more with social movements. Their strategies range from confrontation to partnerships. Social movements are more vocal and direct. They aim to disrupt the systems and push for structural change. So the big question here is how to deal with power. Should we confront it? Should we resist it? Ignore it? Work around it? And these are all valid and legitimate dilemmas. Everyone faces different constraints and operates within different limits when trying to promote change. But our objective here, when we've been writing and developing the elephant at the table, has been clear. We need to place power at the center of the global food systems debate because we think that ignoring it is only going to perpetuate inequality and ecological destruction. Avoidance has a significant cost. If we continue to sideline power, we will not transform food systems. We will keep using that word, that term, transformation, but without any real possibility of achieving it. So our report, The Elephant at the Table, like Chris mentioned, lays out concrete policy pathways to do it, to address these power inequities, to confront them in key domains, including agroecology, aquatic food, supply chains, neglected and underutilized species, seeds, healthy diets, and governance. And we think that to move forward, we need to bring more people, more organizations into the conversation. Not only the social movements and the progressive scholars that have led these debates for decades, but also governments, UN agencies, NGOs, international organizations, and the broader public. And this requires cooperation across very different actors and interests, including those who operate from positions of power within the system. And this is why we're trying to bring this conversation to different places and spaces. So thank you for being part of this exciting endeavor. And I hand it over to my co-editor, Kristen Reynolds, who will walk us through the power inequities that we have analyzed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose Luis. So I'm just going to say a couple of additional words of context. These are some points that Jose Luis already spoke to. But just to take as backdrop that, again, people working in the food system and government policy, as well as social movements and academia, understand very well power and power inequity. In this project, we have decided to consider power inequity in terms of the uneven nature of political agency, economic, and other areas of influence, from global scales to local scales. We follow or take inspiration from the World Health Organization that has stated that power inequities are about avoidable differences. And I suppose that this also connects to the work of Amartya Sen and others who have talked about the ways that power inequities and hunger are not just things that happen by chance, but rather things that are constructed into policy and decision making. Not, as Jose Luis has mentioned, not addressing power perpetuates the status quo. And so we need to, we believe, confront these power inequities in and through power analysis. So this is a bit of the backdrop for our work. So I want to just give a brief overview of the areas of power analysis that we address in the first part of this report. So the first is access to and control of over resources. Actually, this is the overview. So I'm going to speak to all four and then talk about the rest of this. So access, unequal access, ownership, and control over resources is the first. Second is exclusive governance. Third is widespread market concentration. And fourth is addressing precarious and underpaid labor. So now I'd like to just walk through a few examples that elucidate these areas of power analysis. So first, getting into access and control over resources. Before I talk about natural resources, I want to underscore that we recognize the critique of the term natural resources as being centered on humans and out of step with many cultures, and including indigenous cultures' worldviews about resources and the relationship between all forms of resources, including human and non-humans. Nonetheless, we use the term and the concept of natural resources in this report for legibility and policy discourse. Natural resources then are treated, as many here have recognized, as commodities rather than as essential to life. So to choose one example from the table on this slide, control over natural resources, including seeds, land, and water, if we think about this from a power inequities analysis, are rooted in colonial and neo-colonial legacies that are, as well as being related to capitalist ones. Further, gendered hierarchies, which are also, in many cases, colonial impositions rather than traditional cultural elements, limit women's control over natural resources. Women own only 1/5 of land globally, and this is exacerbated and strengthened by not only imposed cultural norms, but also finance and global patriarchy. Historically, inequities in natural resource control are exacerbated by contemporary patterns like land grabbing and water grabbing that take place as foreign governments, wealthy individuals, and firms take over and purchase large tracts of land for speculation and/or national food security concerns in uncertain times. Commodification and concentration of land ownership have long been influenced by corporations, including the backing of military coups, as in the case of banana republics in Latin America. And so these are examples of the power inequities that drive the unequal access, ownership, and control of natural resources. And of course, they lead to negative outcomes like marginalization, overexploitation of resources, financial speculation, food security, and environmental degradation. So to underscore again the point that this is not just about access, but rather about control over and ownership of natural resources within that conventional framing. The second frame is about governance, exclusive governance, and politics. So many would recognize that power inequities are embedded in the structures of governance from nation state to global scales. They're also rooted in weakened state capacities, which again themselves are a construction of long-term geopolitics and neoliberal reforms. So the example I want to address here is the privileging of Western and Eurocentric knowledge systems embedded in policy and decision-making. This sidelines indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge, and local knowledge, and even strategies for, quote, inclusion within debates on policy don't necessarily challenge these decision-making processes, nor the dominance of these knowledge systems. Of course, we can't have a conversation about food and power today without recognizing the current geopolitical context, including authoritarianism and fascism that is on the rise globally, geopolitical instability, market and trade disruptions, supply chain disruptions, the diminishment of global aid. And so these disruptions suggest the shift from a not uncontroversial liberal consensus, but this consensus rested on the faith in markets and the stability of a global paradigm led by powerful democratic states, namely the United States and its allies. And of course, this is shifting. So in summary, these power inequities in governance are embedded in government and political systems, suggesting the need for change at this scale. The third area of analysis is about widespread market concentration. So as has been noted already, many scholars and think tanks have studied corporate concentration and control in the food system, including Molly Anderson, who is here with us today, iPaz Food, Jennifer Clapp, Raj Patel, Phil Howard, and many others. looking at concentration from agricultural inputs to global trade to land control and so on. Noting that corporations have historically and continue to exert uneven power in decision-making and control in these systems. Again, these realities are rooted in political and economic processes that date back centuries, including colonization, I've already mentioned, the Banana Republic's involvement in military coups, the Green Revolution and aid that were driven certainly in part by an imperative to address global hunger and avoid it, but they also had geopolitical underpinnings that connect back to the previous point on geopolitics. So I'll keep this a bit more brief to underscore that when we're thinking about market concentration with respect to power inequities, it's important to look not only at the current contemporary concentration that is led by global transnational corporations, but also its legacies in historical processes from colonization to globalization and beyond. And finally, we are looking at precarious and undervalued labor in the food system. As many know, today's food economy globally is built on underpaid and exploited people working in the food system. Yet again, this is historical as it is contemporary, ranging from both historical and contemporary or modern day enslavement of people to structural dependence on underpaid or precarious migrant labor. Here again, I want to highlight the gendered and intersectional inequalities and inequities that exist within the labor system. Globally, women and informal workers are paid the least. They have the least secure and often most dangerous jobs within the food system, from agriculture to food preparation and beyond. Informal and undocumented labor, which again is entrenched by policy decisions about labor, immigration, and other areas, means that the reliance on informal labor means that much labor is not even counted in statistics, giving us a poorer understanding of the extent of this power inequity. So these are, again, not incidental, nor the sign of simply a broken food system, but rather built into the inequities of the global scenario. So I've highlighted some examples of the 4 areas of analysis that we addressed in the report, and underscore just a final time before passing to Jose Luis that if we genuinely want a more equitable and sustainable food system, the question cannot simply be about access or inclusion of marginalized communities or sectors in mainstream policy making that ignore power inequities and maintain the status quo knowledge and decision making. Rather, we have to confront power directly within policymaking decisions and the policies themselves. So I'm going to pass it to Jose Luis to talk a bit about some of the recommendations that we put forth.
Thank you, Kirsten. And as I mentioned before, what we aim to do is to propose concrete policy pathways with concrete recommendations. And this is an overview of the 4 themes that we cover in the report. One is related to access. The second is about rebalancing power between actors. The third is about reclaiming control over food access. And the fourth is about narratives. And I'll explain briefly each one of them. You can find the very detailed recommendations in the first chapter of the report. But if we go to the next one, I'll start with the first one on resources. What we mean by resources is from land to oceans, including forests, and also including the public investment that is destined to support technology, innovation, infrastructure. Only to highlight one key issue that gives us a little bit of hope at the global level is that the conversation about land reform, one of the conversations that was sidelined, marginalized, and avoided for many decades because it was highly controversial and highly political, now it's taking a more like central stage at the global level. And that's what we promote in the report, like addressing directly and evaluating how a land reform can work in different contexts. If we go to the next one, please. The second is about rebalancing power between actors. Overall, we recommend to strengthen the power of those actors that are more aligned with real transformation, that are more aligned with sustainability, with ensuring affordable and healthy food access with inclusion. And of course, this includes confronting the corporate concentration that has negative outcomes in different parts of the supply chain, from the agricultural inputs to grain trade to retail. But not only that, also on the fishing industry, agriculture industry, there's significant concentration, and also other sectors that are related, like digital platforms that have taken a more important role in the last few years. But this also means strengthening, of course, like social movements and those other movements, grassroots movements that are more aligned with transformation, but also strengthening the weak government institutions so they can guarantee ecosystems sustainability and better food access. And this is related with the neoliberal state retreat that happened for many decades, not only in the global south, but also in the global north. If we go to the next one, please. This takes me to the third policy pathway, which is reclaiming control over food access. This is actually related to the current debate on affordability. For decades, the predominant idea has been that private markets define food access. No, we want to challenge that vision because it hasn't ensured this idea of private markets in charge of this, hasn't ensured healthy and affordable and diverse food access, especially for the people that need it the most. And what do we imply by guaranteeing this food access? For example, is the support of traditional food markets in many countries in the global south and for public grocery stores in many countries in the global north, an idea that has been floating around only recently. These options would help to ensure this affordability, especially of fresh fruits and vegetables and very nutritious products. And the final pathway is related to narratives and how can we influence the policy discourse that also influences the decisions that are taken within the political system. There are like many narratives that strengthen extractive and healthy and unfair food systems. For example, the obsession with increasing productivity to feed a growing population when we already produce food for 12 billion people. We should expose these narratives, including similar narratives like sustainable intensification, or the idea that artificial intelligence and digital technologies are the silver bullet to solve all the challenges around food. They can help in many ways, but they are not the silver bullet in any ways, and they also present like significant dangers. But we need to offer other alternatives and hopeful narratives of transformation. And always the idea should be that always we should bring power to the center, because then we ask ourselves, what happened with this, all this evidence that we have on climate change and agriculture or fisheries? Why is not being used? And in many cases, the evidence is there, the scientific research is there, but the decisions are not taken because of lack of political will, because we haven't created a debate, systems of decision making that considers and centers power in this conversation. So that's what we're trying to do. I invite everybody to check the report, The Elephant at the Table. It's on the chat, and to check the detail of the recommendations that we offer. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Jose Luis and Kristen, for this thoughtful framing around how power influences food and strategic recommendations on pathways forward. I'm excited now to turn it over to our expert commentators and our co-hosts. First up, we'll have Eddie Mukibi, followed by Molly Anderson, and then Anna Pascal. Each will share a brief 5-minute reflection, connecting today's presentation to their own work. As a reminder, please submit any questions that you may have into the Q&A box. Eddie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you all those who have joined us. Thank you, Jose, Louis, and Christine for the presentations, and also for putting together this very important report. For many years, working in the food system transformation, and also as a farmer, as an educator, my thinking has always been, how do we tilt the scale of power towards those who really matter, from the corporates that there for their own business gain, and also concentrating too much power to the people who really need to use this power to make the world a better place, to make the planet a better place. So when I read this report and also listening to these presentations, I get this reflection of the work that we have been doing as Slow Food, as a social movement, as an eco-gastronomic movement that is dealing with the challenging the concentration of power in the corporate industry sector towards people who come together, the artisans. In Slow Food, we have, let's say, a language that we use. We are a movement of the artisans, of the people at the grassroots levels, and the people who really protect and preserve the planet. One thing, most of the work that we have done, we have realized there is a lot of, when we are talking about concentration of power, there are 3 or 4 different ways to deal with power. Also looking at the report and also the presentations. One way how we deal with power is to resist. There is we cannot deal with power in the food system if we do not build resistance. There is a lot of pushback from the corporate industry. When you come to the global south, the place where I come from, the part of the world where I come from, there is a lot of corporate push towards controlling of the natural resources, and these resources have been preserved and protected by people for millennia. So when the corporates come, they invest a lot of money, they invest a lot of military might in the forest, in the plains, to get what they want. And one thing, what we are, one of the ways we can challenge this power is to build resistance. But this resistance should be built right from the grassroots level, building communities, working with the communities to understand their power. In my country, in our national constitution in Uganda, the article number 1 says power belongs to the people. So we need to utilize this opportunity because it's our right given by the constitution. For example, in my country, that we need to build this power around people to resist the criminality of the corporate industry, to resist the concentration of power in the corporates. That is resistance, and resistance can come in many, many different ways. Sometimes resistance is non-confrontational, or sometimes it's confrontational. But again, and looking at the second part, to challenge power, also we need to confront power head on. Confronting could be in the boardrooms. It could not. It may not be on the streets. There are many ways of doing resistance, but also confrontation can be in peaceful confrontation of power. This means analyzing the policies and also shifting or influencing these policies towards those which are pro-people, which are pro resilient and sustainable food systems. Or in Slow Food, we say policies that are built towards a good, clean, and fair food system. So this is one of the ways we can challenge power. We don't need to shy away from talking about power. This is why this webinar is very, very important right now. We need to come to bring this right to the community level for a lot of people to understand how we confront power. We can do it through dialogues. We can do it through policy analysis, and also people participating in policy processes. That is one of the ways we can confront power. Also, the report, if you read between the lines in the report, it gives us a very important aspect of working around power. So there is already power in the government institutions. There is already power in the national governments. How do we work with this power to make sure that it shifts, the resources do not go to the corporates. They go to the people who produce the food that we eat every day, the people who protect biodiversity. So we need to mobilize and form and support networks, more people to understand the elephant at the table. And also for the work that I've done through Slow Food in many places, especially in Africa and other places, I've realized there are many political leaders who want to do the right thing, but they don't understand because they have been greenwashed, or they have been educated through a criminal and also a corporate system. They think that agriculture should be moving towards a more high-tech, sophisticated system. Agriculture should be around the green revolution, or they think that the future of food in Africa or in the global south is in green revolution and use of external inputs. It's not their problem. This is part of the education that we have been oriented with. So we need to reorient these policymakers, those who already having power, to reorient them to understand how their political decisions affect the future of the people they lead. Lastly, over the years at Slow Food, we have realized that there is a lot of power around biological and cultural diversity. Corporates have gained a lot of power. There is a lot of corporate concentration of power because they have succeeded in reducing the number of species and also the number of technologies around the food system. When we reduce biological and cultural diversity to just a few corporate controlled species, we're actually losing power. To regain this power, for the people to gain this power, we need to fight so hard to protect the biological and cultural diversity. We need to stand against the standardization of taste. We need to stand against the standardization of flavors, the standardization of meals. We need to talk about consumption. Consumption is moving generally towards a more fast and less ecological consumption behavior. This is part of the corporate strategy to concentrate more power from around production, around consumption, but also around resources. So standardization of food cultures towards a more fast and less ecological consumption behavior is one of the ways the corporates gain power. So we need to work in the reverse order. We need to stand against this. So working around biological and cultural diversity, that has been the main work of Slow Food for many, many years, for over 3 decades. It's the goal is to reduce on or to challenge the power corporates have, because their success comes in less and less species we have on the table. Their success comes in less and less seeds they put on the market that they can control, less and less technologies that they can put in their hands that they can use to control the rest of the world. And then also in terms of one last thing I want to say is about research and funding of research when it comes to food and agriculture. There is a lot of power issues there. There is most of the countries, especially in the global south, we have realized that most of the research is funded by corporate the corporates in the national research organizations, in the universities. A lot of work is going on. I come from this background where one of the projects I was working on was a corporate, in the university was a corporate funded project, and it was about developing new hybrid maize varieties, and it didn't work. But this is an example of how corporates can influence false solutions, and they get through the research arena as real solutions. So as we are working around challenging power and also resisting power, and also as we are working to expose the elephant at the table, the field of research and who funds your research actually in the end dictates the outcomes. So this is very, very, very important to address. And I'm happy all these issues are in the report. So we need to now work to make sure that everyone understands how do we work around power, how do we challenge power, how do we resist power, and how do we actually build power towards artisans and smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Eddie. That was incredible, and a powerful reminder that the power belongs to all of us, the people. And I love your comment around when we lose species diversity, we also lose power. That's very powerful. Now I will pass it over to Molly Anderson.
Thank you, Chris. Let me just start by saying that I am delighted by the attention of people from the New School and the New Institute to Power and Food Systems. The authors and editors of The Elephant at the Table have made really great contributions toward better understanding this critical issue. And I especially appreciate the attention to the historical roots of power and colonialism and imperialism that Kristen emphasized, and how these are sending tentacles into the present and future of food systems. Recent developments in the United States in geopolitics illuminate how power operates and the consequences of an insatiable greed for more power, the manipulation of discourse, the Orwellian reframing of war as peace and defense, uh, and the consequences on farmers and civilians, as well as countless needless deaths and environmental damage. I would like to add a category to the list of areas of power inequity that Kristen introduced, and that's undervalued nature as well as undervalued labor. The issue here isn't just access to and control over so-called resources and equating progress with greater access and control, but humans' core relationship to nature. This comes up in the discussion of innovation in the report, as well as resources. Nature exists for its own sake, and human well-being is inseparable from the epistemological stance of nature as kin, to be loved and protected as we love and protect humans to whom we feel kinship. The rights of nature movement makes progress in the right direction here. I'd also like to raise the issue of who is needed and who should be centered in the fight for equity. I don't think we should be aiming for participatory or inclusive governance, but rather we should be centering social movements of the people who are being oppressed by corporate power and that have clear oppositional stances to existing power relationships. They are visibilizing inequities. Inclusive governance is far too easily co-opted by the most powerful actors, just like multi-stakeholder platforms. When we start thinking about how change will happen, getting into the recommendations that Jose Luis introduced, I question whether it's resource allocation or narrative change that's the starting point for justice. Resources won't be reallocated unless there's public demand, as well as just acceptance of the necessity of reallocation. That will mean giving up some of the things that we in the United States and other industrialized countries see as our entitlements, our cars, sometimes our multiple cars, our ability to eat meat whenever we want, our extravagant energy consumption. So I tend to emphasize how we can fight disinformation that lulls the public into acquiescence with the status quo, much more than measures such as land reform or fair taxation or limits on the financialization of resources. These are all important, of course, but it's a question of where we start and where change begins. Right now, one of the biggest nodes of change is supporting renewable energy wherever it can be implemented. Solar arrays, wind towers, balcony solar, EVs. You can read Bill McKibben's recent book, Here Comes the Sun, for a stunning portrayal of the economic advantages of renewable energy and how far the United States is falling behind China in development of the needed technology, development and implementation. But here's our president using our tax dollars to fund the termination of contracts to build wind towers and pushing for more oil and gas extraction. It's hideous. And finally, I'd like to say that the biggest elephant at the table for me is capitalism. That's the economic system that compels a race to the bottom of labor exploitation, incessant competition among businesses, and externalizing damage to the environment and to future generations. Many people see capitalism as a kind of third rail because criticizing it, at least here in the United States, seems so impractical. And it's possible that a kinder, more humane capitalism, such as Marjorie Kelly recommends in The Divine Right of Capital, that may be feasible. Maybe better regulation of the excesses of capitalism is the key. Mamdani's win in New York shows that people are very eager to choose a different kind of economic system. And it's very clear that we need to draw back from capitalism's growth mandate and the idea that the primary responsibility of businesses is returns to shareholders before we destroy our planet and decimate its most vulnerable populations. We need to shift to a well-being economy where care, happiness, and meeting the basic needs and rights of all people matter more than profits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Molly. So many powerful words there, but yeah, thanks for reminding us on who should be centered in this conversation. Where do we start? Where change begins, and your vision for a kinder, more humane form of capitalism focused on well-being. That's amazing. Thank you. Um, and now I will pass it over to our final co-host, Anna Pascal. Over to you, Anna.
Hi, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here and to see so many familiar faces and to see people calling in from all over the world. So there's so much richness that's been presented already for us, and this is a really meaningful report. I think it's foundational for us to bring together these different themes, and especially to bring them together centering food sovereignty, which is very rare. To have food sovereignty as a framework for analysis is new and is a way of bringing together the various threads and themes that come out of these different areas of our food systems. So really huge congratulations to the team that put this together. And thank you so much to Molly and Eddie for the really profound comments that you shared. I'm going to focus my comments on another initiative that was midwifed by the brilliant Jose Luis Chicoma, who was behind this report, which is the Food and Power initiative of the UNDP Food Systems team. So the UNDP does a lot of work around the world. Millions of dollars goes into technical assistance and has for a long time. And people within the food systems teams have noticed over years that they were not always meeting the goals that were hoped for, and that power dynamics was a central theme of what was presenting the transformations from taking place that were intended through this work. And Jose Luis, working together with Andrew Bovarnik, who's the global head of the food systems team, started having conversations about the possibility of starting a new initiative within the food systems team on food and power, really shining a spotlight specifically on the power asymmetries, power inequities, power dynamics that hold back food system transformation. So over a number of years, critical conversations took place, a lot of discussions with people who are experts on food and power, many I see on the call today, to discuss whether people felt that would make sense for the UNDP, this specific team, to take on with their positionality and what could be done that wasn't already happening. What new conversations could be convened, could be hosted, what new actors could be brought to the table who don't usually have a chance to talk to one another. And just yesterday, we reached a landmark moment in the Food and Power Initiative, launching our new community of engagement. So the community of engagement of the Food and Power Initiative will focus on a few key themes, which are directly connected to the themes in this report. Working on both rebuilding power and food sovereignty through scaling up agroecology and looking at the power dynamics within the scaling up of agroecology. So what are the vested interests that are holding that back? What are the hidden and invisible obstacles that need to be front and centered and have a spotlight shined upon them? And what is the backroom lobbying and interference happening at a policy level that's preventing their scale up and their take up? We'll also be focusing specifically on the addressing corporate power in food systems. So that's a theme that crosses through everything, as we've already heard today extensively, and figuring out together with people who are working in the Food and Power Initiative what can we do together that people are not already doing on their own? So there's decades and decades of fantastic work on corporate power from civil society and social movements, Indigenous peoples, really visionary work that's at once critiquing and resisting, as Eddie was explaining, and also making new proposals of how markets should be run, territorial markets and local food systems, and shifting power in that way, in a structural system-based way. And we'll also be looking at what are some of the power dynamics at play within different UN processes, and trying to better understand what could be made to strengthen those, working together with other participants in the community of engagement. We'll also be having a focus on narratives and the importance of narratives for systems change, as Molly and Jose Luis and Eddie, everybody mentioned actually, Kristen as well. And shifting power in that way, reclaiming power in that way. And we will be doing country level work. So we've developed a power mapping methodology and power learning journey process to look at the power dynamics of specific policies and policy reform processes in different countries. So we're starting with Brazil, where they have a flagship national school meal program that I'm sure many people have studied on this call. It's excellent in so many ways. And they have a fantastic healthy eating strategy, and they would like to align those two things, but there is commercial interference. There's lobbying and other commercial interference that's preventing the alignment of the healthy eating strategy and the school food program. So together with the government of Brazil and CONSEA and civil society groups and academics, the Food and Power Initiative will be undertaking a power learning project in Brazil and in Uganda around the national agroecology strategy and what the power dynamics are at play there. I should mention that both Eddie and Jose Luis are advisory committee members of the Food and Power Initiative. And Molly has been involved throughout, feeding in ideas and participating in convenings and commenting on different documents, including, for instance, the power mapping methodology. So this is very aligned with the work that we're talking about today. So maybe I'll leave it there for now. And yeah, it's just wonderful to be here. And it's so great to see the exponentially growing attention on food and power. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Anna. Such incredible work around the community of engagements and the Food and Power Initiative that UNDP is working on. I specifically love the focus on narratives for systems change. I think that's a very powerful approach. So yeah, thank you to all the co-hosts and the panelists for sharing their insightful knowledge. As a reminder, this live recording will be shared after the webinar as well as the slides. Now we have around 9 minutes for Q&A. And so I will, there were a few questions focused on the concentration of power and the grocery supply chain, and specifically around monopolies in the grocery system, and how do we challenge these power dynamics, specifically supermarkets and supermarket monopolies. And so maybe I will pass it over to Anna first. And I saw that you put a comment on the chat around that, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm so glad to see that topic actually rise up like that. So I work with the Food and Power Initiative. With another hat, I also work a lot in Canada, where I'm strategic advisor to Food Secure Canada. And we've been doing extensive work on a public option for grocery. So actually inspired by the US military commissary. So the US military runs the biggest public grocery model in the world with over 200 stores serving 8 million people. And it's mandated to provide a 23.7% rebate over local grocery stores. So 23.7% cheaper than local grocery stores for military staff and veterans. So our greatest model of a socialist, one could say, grocery model is within the US military. There are also excellent public grocery store models in other countries. And in Canada, we're working hard to advance our own modeling. And we're seeing a huge amount of public interest and of government interest. There are now motions on the floor. One is going tomorrow in Toronto, in different municipalities, in different provinces, and we're having conversations at the federal level. I think the really important thing to say about public grocery is that if it's done well, it should also include a nonprofit procurement stream. So bringing together the purchasing power of school food programs, of public institutions, combining that procurement power to be able to lower prices in the industrial model to pass on further savings, and to give very good prices for local and regional food systems. So to have two distinct procurement streams that can build local and territorial food systems is really essential.
Excellent. Thank you, Anna, for those practical applications and case studies. Over to you, Molly. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, that was a great overview of the status of public markets. And of course, we don't have public markets accessible to everyone yet, but in many places you can still access food through different business models by either shopping direct from farmers to cut out the middleman that's taking so much of the profits in supermarkets, or by shopping at food cooperatives, which again are set up in a different way to return value back to the members. Over.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I?
Over to you, Eddie. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to add to what Anna and Molly said. When it comes to supply chains, I like Jose Louis already knows that I love using public like supply systems instead of supply chains. One thing to reorient power around supply chains, we need to advocate or push for supply systems which actually recognize local and territorial markets. Many times, when you look at supply chains, they actually the opposite of what the local economy is actually working on, and it's an experience that has been built for so many years. It's a business chain that has been a model that has been built for so many years. So supporting the development of territorial markets, which are providing fresh and high quality local products, is part of the work that we basically are doing, and also what we need to continue doing and promote more and support more territorial markets. These territorial markets, from my experience, they don't have the same incentives and subsidies like the big corporate monopolies. But we need to reorient the policies towards incentivizing and also supporting the territorial markets. Another important thing to look at when we're talking about supply systems, we need to also look at public procurement policies. Many of these monopolies thrive because they are actually taking a lot of public funds from public procurement systems. So if we change or reorient the public procurement, most of the rice that is cooked in most of the African hospitals and schools is actually imported from Asia. Yet there is a lot of high quality rice and grown locally and supplied locally, but they don't get a chance to participate in public procurement processes. So if we reorient the policies towards clear locally oriented supply public procurement policies, we can fix or reorient power around supply chains.
Excellent. Thank you, Eddie. One of the other questions was, can Eddie give an example of a successful confrontation of power in the food system? So that's a perfect example. Thank you. And Kristen, I will pass it over to you, then Jose Luis for a comment and close.
Sure. I'll speak and then pass to Jose Luis. Yeah, I think I just want to then underscore again this imperative for narrative shift that we talk about. We build on Molly's work. her book, the comment that Molly's made as well regarding this question of public markets. And just to briefly cite, the example that's already been referenced about New York City and the idea to have publicly owned grocery stores in New York City has been met in some political circles with resistance about too much state meddling in people's business, and you can imagine the narrative that goes from there, leading into like socialism and all of these kinds of things. But at the same time, as Anna pointed out, that we actually have a precedent within the United States military. And so I think a narrative shift just around this question is about shifting, the broader public's understanding about the existing realities of public markets that are actually already funded by the government and could be extended into other realms of public life.
Thanks, Kristen. And over to you, Jose Luis.
Thank you, Chris. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left, and actually, I'm very excited because of like all the buzz around the traditional and informal supply chains. We have another webinar. Chris, you are going to announce the upcoming webinars, but there's one in April 22 around the supply chains. So that's great. We're going to discuss more about traditional food markets, informal vendors, street vendors that are quite important in some cities like Mexico City, where I'm talking from, and also like public grocery stores. So join us also for that one. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much to the presenters for the rich information, the co-hosts for their valuable perspectives, and all of you for joining for this incredibly important topic that's often under-addressed. As mentioned in the chat, the published policy brief is available online. There's a link in the chat. We'll follow up with that as well. Our next session will be at the same time on Wednesday, April 15th with myself, Chris Foliano, on strategies to make biodiverse, healthy diets affordable and accessible. You can scan the QR code here to sign up for the rest of the live webinar series. And so to close, if today showed us anything, it's that the future of food belongs to us, the people, and so does the power to change it. So thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you at the next webinar.